Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, dealing with increasing intolerance for Christian views here in America. We'll have that conversation coming up next.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. My name is Dan Andros, joined as always by Billy Hallowell. Going to have a good conversation today, Billy, talking about how Christianity and Christian views are perceived in America now. We used to sort of be in the catbird seat, and it was easy peasy for the most part. You know, you could safely have Christian views and really not worry about any repercussions of that. But that's changing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, you're even seeing the majority of Americans say that they think Christians and Christianity are sort of under attack, right? And so it's transforming pretty quickly. And I think that claim that Christians were, senselessly complaining about this is starting to evaporate.
Right. And I think in the sense of persecution, it's like, okay, it's not persecution like we're seeing with Christians in the Middle East. Like if you're in Iran and you come out as a Christian, or you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, that's a whole different level of persecution right now, right? That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is you can have repercussions for, like our guest here had, for expressing Christian views.
It's intolerance, Dan. Intolerance is the word, I think.
But you could lose things like your job or other access to things. You might get booted off of social media. Like there are things that are happening now that seem to be encroaching on Christian views. And so without further ado, I want to bring in our guest today, Sophia Nelson, author of Be the One You Need, 21 Life Lessons I Learned While Taking Care of Everyone But Me. Sophia, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and I love the show.
All right. And you've had some experience with this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happened in your life?
Well, you guys had me on last fall. Billy did a segment when all what broke loose on my college campus here in Virginia at Christopher Newport University. It was in the height of our gubernatorial elections here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Faith and the viewpoints of parents and the rights of parents was the number one issue in our election in Virginia. And I happen to be following DC comic books. I love them, as does everybody. And on October 11th last fall, they announced on National Coming Out Day. I had no idea it was National Coming Out Day. I wouldn't. But at the end of the day, they announced that they were going to have a new superhero, and that superhero was going to be Superman and Lois Lane's son, who is a boy, and he was going to be bisexual and have a boyfriend who had pink hair. And in this image that they released on social media, they admitted they wanted to be provocative. It had the one boy with pink hair, the other Superman-like character was grabbing him to forcefully kiss him. And I immediately caught my attention. I said, oh, wait, time out. What about Christian parents here? What if their kids are reading comic books and they might not want them to be exposed to this? Why did I say that? I really asked the question. It's the gospel truth. You can Google this. It's all out there. And it went downhill from there. A openly gay bisexual professor on my campus took my private tweet that was on my public feed. And under the First Amendment, that is protected speech. My employer has no right to chastise me for it or check me for it. It had nothing to do with my job or teaching, and she brought it into the university. She began petitions. She got a whole department. She went on a rant and pulled in people. Then the students started. I was protested. There was a petition to remove me. I ultimately lost my position. Over asking a question about parents' rights in an election that Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia on this exact issue. So go figure that.
What was it like for you? So you put this tweet out, you send it, all of this chaos happens. What were you feeling in the midst of that? Because that's a lot of pressure to come down on somebody, especially somebody who's public and in a position that you're in.
Yeah, I felt two things. One, as soon as I found out that there was this upset with students I was kind of ignoring the faculty who was being a rabble rouser and a troublemaker and saying all kind of unkind things about my faith. I'm a homophobe, I'm this, I'm that. I apologized publicly to my kids because I am a good professor. I love my students. I have all kind of students. And I first apologized in a sense, not that I think what I said was wrong, but if I've hurt kids, I want to talk about it. So that was my first thing. And then the second thing that I felt was it was horrible that in academia, where we are supposed to be the textbook definition of academic freedom, open dialogue, discussion, and debate, if we can't talk about this on a college campus, a public university, not a private one, not a religious one, but a public university, and I'm going to be beat up like this and destroyed like this, be silent and silenced, and be told that I'm hateful and everybody's talking but me. It was ugly. It was hurtful. It did a lot of emotional distress. I was having major surgery at the time, the day they protested me. You can't make this stuff up. It was rough, Billy. I'm not going to lie. It was rough on me, on my family. It was unbelievably bad to be attacked like that in such a public way. And you can't defend yourself. It's just, there's no defending yourself. It is what it is.
Yeah. And as you alluded to here, I mean, you're an educator and you made the point, and I agree that our, universities and our colleges and even our high schools, these should be places where ideas are freely discussed. In general, it seems like we've lost that ability to be able to discuss a topic and disagree and debate the merits of it and then still be friends at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the university setting is important because you've got kids literally from age 18 to age 22. You have some adults, but not on an undergraduate liberal arts campus. You have mostly young people who are right out of high school going into college. And one of the things we want to do, our job is to prepare them for life, to prepare them to go into the workforce, to prepare them to go on job interviews and to engage with other people. And instead, what we're doing now, and this has really happened over the last 10 years in academia, where you have groups like FIRE and ADF and other groups that have had to literally come about to defend faculty and students who are being silent and silenced if they don't have a viewpoint consistent with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I'm a Black woman, so I'm telling you, I live Black in America every day, and that's another conversation for another day. But the point is, no one's going to lecture me about how tough it is to be a marginalized group member. So for me to express my faith and then to come under attack from another group and be told that I can't speak, that I should be removed, that I'm dangerous because my faith is a pretext for my hatefulness, and then to have that be rubber stamped by the university, rubber stamped by officials, everybody jumps on the bandwagon. And so the kids, instead of seeing adults act like adults and like leaders and set an example, the kids actually are running the university. The kids are running the dialogue because nobody wants to offend any group. And so I was expendable. And so what we showed these young people was when you get pissed off, when you don't like a point of view, or if your feelings are hurt and you felt, what was the word they use? Unsafe. My tweeted question made them unsafe. I did violence to them. We've taught them now that when you don't like something that somebody says or how they feel or how they see the world, you destroy them, you take their reputation, you take their job, and you remove them. What kind of country are we going to be if this is what we're teaching the next generation, Y and Z, how to live? We failed them. We failed them terribly in this instance, terribly.
I see this same thing teaching students at the college level. They're afraid. Even some of the Christian students are afraid to say what they believe. They're afraid to pick topics that might be difficult, like the topics we're talking about. And they'll come to me privately and ask me if they can do it, if they can speak about these things. The fact that that is happening at a college level, especially at a public college, is incredibly problematic. And I think about the gospel. If we're to go out there and share the gospel and people look at what happened to you and then they're afraid to do it, right? They're thinking, well, if I say anything, this is going to happen to me. what do we do as believers? What do we have to do? What did you do in navigating this that would help us sort of push past that fear to continue to be bold for truth?
Well, as I said, I'm at a public university in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Ironically, our president of the university, Paul Tribble, who's now retiring, was a United States Senator, Republican, a member of Congress, Republican, conservative. And I think what hurt me the most is here's a guy who got in trouble for hosting Bible studies on campus with students, but doesn't come to my defense and simply say, wait a minute, time out. We're not doing this to her. She's a member of this community. You're upset. I'm going to lead a discussion. Game over, the end. Instead, capitulated. The Christian example, the president, again, who has Bible studies, leans into, we're going to love our gay community. We're going to accept them, blah, 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 blah. Who said anything about that? My tweet had nothing to do with them or anything about them. It's a comic book character. So again, what we do is the people who were DMing me and sending, text and writing me emails, faculty and otherwise, were terrified because they're like, if they can do this to somebody like you who's got a big platform and who is in the public's eye, I can't afford to lose my job. I'm 2 years away from retirement and I want to back you up, but I'll pray for you. What happens is that people are afraid, like you said. And so what I did was I leaned into my faith community, my church, my family, my friends. Also immediately got connected with people like ADF and Fire and others who really gave me a lot of good guidance and support. And I will say that this matter's not over by a long shot. There will be legal repercussions here. We've been preparing for this for a while because I've made the decision personally as a Christian that I'm going to put a stake in the ground on this one. I'm not going to let this go unaddressed. I'm not going to let the people that did this get away with it because I never want another Christian professor anywhere in the Commonwealth or otherwise to be abused like this because they asked a civil, respectful question and engage dialogue, which is what we're supposed to do in the public square. I'm not going to let this moment pass without me taking a stand, which I did in the New York Post, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about that. So, yeah. Take a stand.
Yeah, and we're going to
short answer.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more coming up. Maybe it's time for more Christians to decide whether it's time for them to take a stand on their beliefs before it's too late, really, quite honestly. So more with author Sophia Nelson right after the break. All right, we're back here on Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Billy Hallowell there. We're joined by author Professor Sophia Nelson. Her book, Be the One You Need, 21 Life Lessons I Learned While Taking Care of Everyone But Me. And there's some very applicable lessons in there, Sophia. You had one that you just added that is really fitting for what we just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we went through this whole thing at my campus last fall of 2021, the book was just about to go to print, and I added in a life lesson, number 16, which is do not cancel and publicly shame people. And basically what I'm saying is really to young people, but those of us at midlife do this on social media. And too, we just saw the First Lady of the United States get into some hot water over some comments she made, and she had to apologize to the Latino community. And so we're in this culture now where we go, gotcha, and then we get you, and then we beat you up on social media for a week. If you're public like me and others, you get articles written about you, you get all kind of stuff, and then you have to apologize, and then you got to try to atone. Most of the time your apology is not accepted, and then you get into more trouble. So I'm trying to call all of us, particularly those of faith, wait a minute, folks, Jesus, our Lord and Savior, is about grace. Doesn't mean he doesn't have rules and regulations and things that we ought to follow. Of course he does. But when people mess up, when we make mistakes, let's call people in after we call them out. Call them in after we call them out. Because correction and repentance is what saves my life. And if you can give me grace and point out where I've erred and say, hey, you might want to think about this a little differently and give me a chance to grow and change, that's really the magic of living and being a human being.
Well, there's a big difference between being a maniacal and evil person who is consistently terrible and somebody, and this is most people, who makes a mistake. They were either ignorant about something, or they didn't know, or they spoke wrong, or they were just wrong. And to me, that's the place where the most learning would happen, if you allowed people to actually have that moment instead of making them go through what you just described, which is fruitless, really, for everybody. But I have to ask you, because you were saying, that you're not going to back down, that you're not going to step down from this. And one of the things you did was write a New York Post piece. It was titled, "Christians Are Sick of Being Punished for Their Views in America." Why did you choose to continue that conversation and to write that?
Well, like I said, Billy, I had a book I had to launch, so I had a responsibility to my publisher, but I've been writing pieces all along the way. I've had them in the Washington Post and other outlets from the time this happened last fall till now. But now that I've got the book launch behind me, it's been greatly successful. I'm going to focus back on this issue because I'm not going to let it go. And the New York Post is someone that, an outlet that I felt like I could get a fair shake in and not be edited down in one of the more mainstream publications, if you will, that would maybe say, well, you can't really say this and that's not okay. I think your point is a big one, though, which is that when we make mistakes and we get called out on it, where do we go from there? And a lot of what's going on, particularly Billy and Dan, in the LGBTQ plus community and the DEI community, is that there are a lot of changes happening with language, the way we talk, pronouns. And most people walking around don't have a clue about that stuff. And they don't know what they're supposed to say or what is the right way to address someone. Or, do I say gay or do I say lesbian? Do I say, queer or whatever? This is things we don't know, particularly as people of faith. We don't usually talk about this. So again, you're punishing people for things they don't even know that they've gotten wrong. And that to me is what happened to me. I just didn't know that I couldn't ask a question about a bisexual comic book character without having my life literally attacked. And that's why I wrote the piece.
I kind of call them language wars right now, because I do feel like there's sort of an effort underway to label certain things as hate. There's misinformation now, which even that can be muddy of what's actually misinformation and what's not. And there's this real effort out here to sort of redefine things. And when it comes to Christianity, you see like the SPLC sometimes labels Christian organizations as hate groups. And you just wonder, is it time for Christians to really start digging in and explaining our views and defending our views in greater culture at large? Because it seems like this shift is happening now, so that when people come out with Christian views, such as yourself, now they've got a framework to say, well, this is hate, this is violence, all those things you said they used against you. Do you think that language game sort of creates a need for Christians to really make a stand now?
It's very effective. Listen, if someone calls you, if you're white and you have a point of view and someone calls you a racist, you're immediately going to back up and shut down. If you are a Christian and like me, you ask a question, well, what do Christian parents have a right to say about this? Their kids read comic books, and you call me a hateful, religious bigot, homophobe, transphobe, whatever word you thought me, you back up because you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I am. That's not what I'm saying. So these groups have become very effective, right, at the language game. Like you said, they've become very good. They know how to get on social media. They have words that they use like violence and you make me unsafe. And when you throw those words out at people into the greater, when you're on social media, other people go, oh, well, you're a jerk. And I can't tell you how many people attacked me over the latest article. I'm used to it, but oh, well, I didn't even read the article. Well, why are you talking then? Why are you commenting when you haven't even read what I wrote? Oh, well, I saw what somebody else said about you. I think my biggest fear beyond the word game that we're talking about is how vile our discourse is towards Christians. I could not have tweeted at a Muslimo-fascist, as people call me, Christo-fascist. I could not have tweeted at a Jewish person or written Jew-fascist. That would be unacceptable as it is and ugly, but people were saying it to me and then saying vile curse words, and then they curse at Jesus and they talk about our faith and then that's allowed. I thought that was religious bigotry. If I said it or you said it, we'd be shut down and blackballed immediately. So there's definitely a bias against Christians and people of faith. And if we don't start standing up, it could be too late already in many ways. But I think the right kind of Christians aren't standing up. People like the three of us who are common sense, mainstream, people of faith, but we know how to talk to people. And instead, the caricature is some personality on one of the major networks, right, who totally puts forth hateful things and says, or pastors who say we're going to kill gays, right? That's horrible. That's not Jesus. None of us agrees with that. That's disgusting. But that's what they show to define us as Christians.
Yeah, the double standard there is very apparent, and I think a lot of times one of the reasons why that happens is because to me it's evidence of the truth of the gospel, because it pierces people and then it causes either a response of accepting Christ or one of defiance towards him, and I think you see that play out a lot. Well, we're gonna take a break. We're gonna be back with more with author Professor Sophia Nelson right after this. All right, we're back here on Faith versus Culture. Sophia Nelson, author and professor with us. Be the one you need. 21 life lessons I learned while taking care of everyone but me. Sophia, some final thoughts here before we head out.
Well, first, thank you for having me. We need more dialogues like this. But my final thought and my call and my challenge to us as Christians is this: stand your ground. Always be respectful, always operate in love. But the moment is now for us to speak. We have rights too. We have the same rights as every other citizen to be heard, to be at the table of discourse and dialogue. And don't be afraid of that. And I think that the most important thing, particularly in academia, for my fellow Christian professors and otherwise on secular campuses, don't just back down. Talk to your students, engage them, open dialogue, challenge them to rise higher, because they really want to be challenged. They don't want to be coddled and spoken down to and treated like they're babies. They're adults, and we need to engage them on that level. Those are my final thoughts.
All right. Sophia, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you so much again for having me.
Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of Faith versus Culture. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll be praying for you this week, and we'll see you next time. God bless.